Hi, this is Ms. Bahak. Welcome to the Look Good, Move Well podcast, where you can get fresh ideas for your training, nutrition, and lifestyle to immediately put to use. Listen in with Marcus Philly, the creator of functional bodybuilding, and myself.
Hi, I'm Marcus Philly, and we're broadcasting from Revival Strength in San Rafael, California.
We'll be talking about avoiding burnout, keeping your passion alive for training, and fueling your body and mind so you can look good, move well now, and for years to come. Afternoon sugar and cravings for crappy food can mean your body is depleted, especially if you're training hard and getting behind on quality food. If you want to perform better, stay lean, and feel your body well, listen in for what to change about your daily approach. Well, let's start by playing the question again.
Yeah, play the question again. I gotta dive deep into this one. I gotta really put on my deep listeners.
All right.
How do you deal with clients that are addicted to food or overeat, especially if they're athletes and pretty competitive?
Boom. All right, Elizabeth. Elizabeth Redman, thank you for your submission on speakpipe.com/lookgoodmovewell. If you guys are out there listening right now and you have a burning question for us, or you've got something that you would like to hear as a topic on the Look Good Move Well podcast, all you got to do is go to speakpipe.com/lookgoodmovewell and submit a question or a topic that you'd like to hear about. Elizabeth sent in this question, and we'll repeat it. It's basically, what do you do in situations where you have athletes who are addicted to certain foods or overeat, in particular competitive athletes? So that was kind of the question, and we don't have a lot of other background to that question, so we're going to have to kind of make some assumptions, but let's talk about what those assumptions are before we launch into a conversation about it. What do you think, Ms. Webb?
Well, I think the first thing that comes up for me is, let's say a couple keywords. Emotional eating.
Okay, great.
Sugar. I don't know, like what else could competitive athletes be addicted to, like pre-workout?
Yeah. No, I think we're on the right track here. I mean, having been a competitive athlete, so man, I got a lot of thoughts here because I've been in this boat. Let's just say that addicted to certain foods. So I have to assume that means we're talking about foods that are not good for you. Mm-hmm. If our audience, I know we have a varied audience and a varied group of listeners out there, but perhaps let's assume that they are on the same wavelength with us as like what's bad. Like, is bacon bad? No. So if you think being addicted to bacon's a bad thing, then I encourage you to go back and listen to some of our other nutrition conversations about kind of like quality, macronutrients, what's the most important, where we should be getting our food from. But I don't think we can launch into a conversation about that. I'm assuming that this, Elizabeth is thinking, okay, people are addicted to like crappy processed things, and typically sugary, starchy stuff, mm-hmm. right? Stuff that's like, they love their donuts. They can't stop eating their donuts or their cookies or whatever. And that resonates, like with me. I mean, having coached a lot of competitive athletes and seen people in that, I understand where that comes from. And then the other thing is overeating, right? Eating too much. And that's a tricky one because what constitutes overeating? In a competitive landscape of fitness, if truly performance is the goal, when would you consider somebody overeating? Or when they're gaining too much weight relative to the goals of their sport? Okay, mm-hmm. perhaps. But really, it's like, I think what people get concerned about is they're overeating, so their body composition is changing negatively. They're getting more body fat. But that's not always bad if they're competitive athletes, right? Remember, performance is the key. So are their numbers going up? Are they recovering faster? Are they moving more fluidly, with a little bit more body fat? okay, that's all right, you know. But if they're overeating, you know, what makes that bad? Okay, well, I can understand where that might, maybe they're overeating the wrong type of nutrients, and so they're actually, you know, harming their gut and not getting proper recovery. So again, those are sort of my starting assumptions based upon the question. And you're right, emotional eating, sugar definitely come up for me as well, where it's like, are you, you know, if you have a lot of sugars in your diet, it's easy to overdo it or to stay addicted to sugars because of the, you know, physiological reactions that they have in your body. And then also, if you're a competitive athlete, and then we can probably try and widen the scope of this conversation to people that are not competitive, because that's, I know, a lot of our listeners too. It's like, how do you handle emotional eating, and how is that so closely tied to sugar, stress, etc.?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're going to have just a wide variety of insight when it comes to the competitive landscape. But I also think, I guess the question comes up is like, when do you, with overeating, how do you differentiate between like, ooh, I'm hungry and my body needs more fuel because I'm performing at a higher level, or my output is a little higher than usual and I need to be able to sustain that for performance? And then how do you differentiate between that and like, well, yeah, I'm overeating, I need to cut down on this or that, and differentiating when it's right and when it's wrong. So I guess it comes back to like maybe quality of food and things like that too. But I don't know, that's the first question that kind of comes to mind for me.
Yeah. Well, with competitive athletes, you know, we approach everything very empirically, right? So it's like, how the, you know, we got to look at performance metrics, but we're also going to maintain like a close eye on body composition. So, you know, doing regular check-ins of body weight and composition, it's like, let's start to use that more as like an indicator of like where things are really at. So you added a percentage, 1% body fat these past 8 weeks. Okay. But we also saw improvements in all of your body weight training, conditioning metrics. So what are we going to do? Like, we're going to not do anything, you know? Now we see a dramatic change in body composition or a dramatic change in weight, and we see that the athlete's performance metrics aren't keeping up with that, or they're not, you know, there isn't, the trade-off is there's not an improved performance with that, you know, increase in body composition or body fat perhaps, or then you might want to start to take a closer look at that, be like, okay, I think you're heavier than we, you know, need you to be optimal in this performance-based sport. So those would be kind of just some ways to kind of like be more objective about it, right? Because I think a lot of this comes back to like people stop being able to see their abs, or they're not able to see their abs, and they're like, oh shoot, you know, like I'm not going to be able to perform as well. And those are not directly correlated, right? So if you're trying to compete and get better at the competitive aspect of a sport, then focus on that, you know, and look objectively at your performance metrics. Pay attention to your body composition. And if you start to see things trend, you know, just look at the trends, like improvement in performance, but body composition starting to climb a little bit, and then performance starts to stall out, body composition still climbing. Okay, maybe there's some correlation there, but it's just I think it ultimately comes back to like, well, these are people that love competitive styles of training, but ultimately they're just aesthetically focused. They care about their aesthetics. And so then they're like, they're like addicted to sugars, and they're overeating sugary and starchy stuff. And that is totally our wheelhouse, and that's what we talk about. It's like, yeah, because you're stressed out. You're training so hard, and you're in a competitive mindset where you're pushing intensity and volume. What does that do to your body? It stresses it out. What does a stressed out body do? It burns sugars. What does it crave? Sugars. What does sugars end up doing? It starts damaging your gut and getting bad, you know, gut flora that are starting to overpopulate your digestive system, which then sends signals to your brain saying you need more sugar. It's like you go down this total rabbit hole of you're getting sucked into this whole thing that feeds itself, which is stress, sugar consumption, sugar craving, overeating, having poor appetite control, etc.
So you do need, if you are truly kind of diving into improved performance and your style of training is very demanding, you do need to feed it with sugars to a certain extent. Right?
Totally.
And then
Yeah.
I guess it comes back to maybe quality control to understand, okay, what's going to be supportive of this process versus like just feeding that vicious cycle and you craving more and more.
Yeah, maybe it's the vicious. Here's the vicious cycle, which is, all right. Let's look at like a top CrossFit athlete, or yeah, we'll just take a top CrossFit athlete. When they're training year round, they're putting forth high levels of training volume, relatively high intensity, especially closer to season, and so their bodies are burning sugars a lot. So they eat more sugars, they eat more carbohydrates, and they're basically trying to feed themselves as much as they can to keep up with the demands of their training. But their lifestyle and their focus is built around that. They're truly chasing that as a goal. So it's totally appropriate. And even though the top CrossFit athletes are eating 400 to 500 grams of carbs a day, we're not classifying them as overeaters or addicted to, certain foods. Like,
Right.
okay, so, but the alternative situation that's kind of like this vicious cycle is you got someone following a competitor's training program, okay? Their lifestyle is not built around a competitor's training lifestyle, meaning they do their 2-hour session in the morning, then they head off to work, and then they work super hard and they're super stressed, and then they hit the gym afterwards for another 2-hour session. They get back late at night. They're wired until late in the evening. They get 6 to 7 hours of sleep, and then they rinse and repeat. And they do that. They're just constantly going at that. And that, after a certain period of time, their body's just like in a deficit. It's totally overwhelmed and stressed. They haven't been getting the massage. They haven't been like resting all day and like, doing the fun, like low key, full-time athlete lifestyle stuff. And so their bodies are craving, sugars to keep up, and they're just driving themselves into a deeper and deeper debt of like overwork, overtraining, overstress. And then they're like, again, like the fueling then is not for recovery. It's basically for like stress mitigation and management. And they can't keep up even with like, eating a bunch of calories because their lifestyle's not set up for it. And so it's like training hard. I got to eat, I'm like, I just want sugars all the time. I want to eat bad food. Oh, I just ate a bunch of bad food, so I'm going to go train harder because I'm going to make up for that. Oh, I'm going to eat more, and it's like more bad food, and that's the cycle. So how do we get that person out of that cycle? And that's even true for the person that's not training hard. That's the everyday person who's overworked. They're not moving well in their life. They're just generally stressed. They have emotional stress, mental stress, job stress, and they're eating poor quality food. And so they're in a different type of stress cycle, but it's the same thing. That stress cycle drives them to eat, refined sugars, refined carbohydrates, which then puts them into a deeper stress, because their gut's getting, all messed up from like constant sugar rushes that are going in, and then that gets them even more stressed and more down, and then there's emotions that come into it which push them into wanting to eat more of the bad stuff. So they're kind of similar situations. One is like a quote-unquote healthy behavior because you're training a lot, but that training a lot is actually driving you into a stress state. And then the other person might not be training and they're eating bad food and they're sedentary, but they're in a different type of stress state, which is then pushing them into eating, poor quality foods. And so that's where people get drawn towards bad foods, as Elizabeth, I think, was, kind of alluding to, which is like chips, cookies, cakes, refined carbohydrates, that kind of stuff, sodas, addicted to that stuff because the brain chemistry, the gut chemistry, the gut biome is basically sending signals to say, hey, I need that stuff because that's all I know how to basically process right now.
That's super interesting. I mean, so keeping all that in mind, it's like, where do you start? Because, I mean, we know, like, for example, protein. If you're not getting an adequate amount of protein in your daily diet, that can result in you not feeling as full or as satiated, and that could also elicit cravings that happen, towards the evening or later at night. So there's boxes like that I'm sure you would recommend, okay, let's check these before we start investigating. But what's the starting point to start to, decipher, okay, we're in this vicious cycle, whichever one you're in. Now, how do we start to kind of pick this
Get
apart?
out of it. Well, I think it's starting to kind of look at all your stress buckets, okay, and the ones that maybe we have access to as coaches and we're working on with people is, the food stress that people are under, and then also the training load and the training stress people are under. So for those athletes, maybe Elizabeth, that you're referring to, it's taking a close look at what their training volume might look like, and that might be pushing them into that situation where they're actually, like, they need to potentially do less to get out of that constant craving of bad stuff, overeating of sugars, okay? Additionally, the food stress that they're under, they're craving bad stuff, but it's not 24/7. It's not like they wake up and they're like, I need to eat, like a cake, and then 3 hours later they need to eat it. Like if they're training hard, they're generally, health focused. And if they're health focused or performance focused, they have been educated to some degree on what it means to eat quality foods. So we want to take a really close look at what their food inventory looks like throughout the rest of the day. Are they getting quality ingredients into the other meals? And have you sufficiently tried to reduce their nutritional stress by getting them to eat more vegetables, eat more protein at their meals, have good timing between their meals, not rely on simple, simple sugars in something like breakfast. Somebody who's eating, a refined carbohydrate, they have, their protein pancakes that they make with some oat flour and, protein powder. It's like, okay, that's actually, on paper, it looks pretty good. However, I want to get that person to eat real food. Let's get them to eat, spinach and eggs and some bacon for breakfast with a sweet potato or some actual rolled oats, and that will be a better start to their day, give them higher quality ingredients, and set them up for a better digestion, better gut flora, instead of just plugging in, refined carbohydrates throughout their day. Yeah.
So it's zooming out and taking a look at the whole picture and seeing, like, okay, what are some of the basics or the simple things that we can start chipping away at to see if there's any change before we start, making any other drastic assumptions or changes.
Yeah.
Tracking that.
Yeah. I would also wager a guess that some of the people that Elizabeth is referring to are individuals that subscribe to the, if it fits my macros kind of mentality. And they're just plugging in the right macronutrients, the right amount of carbs, the right amount of protein, and they're not focused on a quality food approach, which is what we have talked so many times about on this podcast, is how do you transition away from thinking that the macros are the most important thing and transition towards, hey, the quality of the food that I'm eating is the most important. Getting them to focus on quality versus the quantity. because that's going to set them up better for good appetite control, good choice making when they're in these stress states. It's going to set their gut up for better digestion, better bacterial colonies in there, better gut health, all of which impacts your brain's decision-making ability around food when it comes time to make choices. And then something I didn't touch on yet is hydration. You know, making sure people are adequately hydrated throughout their day is huge when it comes to fending off the cravings for simple sugars, starches, things like that. And then not trying to another part of this is that sometimes athletes who are trying to train a lot, one common thing that I've seen is they make an effort to like manage their, you know, we talked about quantity, manage their quantities because they're trying to achieve some aesthetic goals as well. So they end up under eating for periods of time while they're training hard. And when you under eat for a period of time and you're training hard, the body starts to get into a deficit and it knows it, and then it reaches kind of a critical point where it's like, I need some food, and then it immediately will start to crave, you know, things that are simple and easy to get sugars from. The stuff that's salty, sweet, and starchy.
In that case, what do you, like if somebody is at that critical point, how, like you mentioned some of the areas to start, but are there certain, you know, starches or sugars that you would recommend that people do kind of take in and feed themselves with in this scenario?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can go through my own personal example of this. Is I have a tendency, and this has been a pattern that I've gone through a number of times, which is I've always been aesthetically conscious, even in my competitive CrossFit days. And that's coming from somebody who knows that performance is super, you know, it's super independent. It's independent of aesthetic, right? Even though I was trying to perform the best and be the best at regionals, like I wanted to look good. And so I tried to do my best to sort of, you know, one approach to like eating for performance is just eat as much as you can and recover as fast as you can. And, you know, if you put on a little body fat, no big deal. It's still all about performance. I didn't subscribe to that. I definitely made sure to eat enough or try as best I could to eat enough. But there was always kind of like trying to play that fine line of like, where am I in kind of an energy balance state? I don't want to just accumulate body fat. What that ended up looking like is that through hard training periods, I would inevitably get behind. And this happens for people in like hard training cycles all the time. It's just there's accumulation of work and effort that's going into the training, CNS fatigue, general stress on the body, and the body just ends up chewing up a lot of energy and needing a lot of energy, and it's difficult to make sure you're getting in enough fuel. So I would find myself getting deficient, and it would start to show up in ways like Elizabeth was talking about. I'd crave bad stuff. I'd want to eat and reach for, you know, bad things, and I would become really aware of that. I would say, oh man, like I can feel my body's depleted. So I would go through a very conscious phase of increasing my consumption, caloric consumption across the board, getting more high quality proteins, more fats in my diet, and more starches, and making sure the starches were coming from good sources. And my good sources in that realm were like oats, potatoes, sweet potatoes, and different shades of potatoes, and then some rice. But I know that rice for me was something that was very, you know, the sugar content, the quick digestion of that rice would put me into kind of a sugar burning state and could lead to me wanting to like have, simpler sugars later on. So I would make an effort to like boost all of my energy, and that for a period of like 2 to 3 weeks, where I would kind of reset and my body would be like, oh, okay, we're like getting back to baseline. So that might mean like doubling my portions at breakfast, or doing 50% more at breakfast than I've been used to, and 50% more at lunch, and doing that for 2 to 3 meals a day regularly for a period of time, until I could feel like, okay, I'm starting to like normalize and balance out here. So that's one strategy, is to find quality foods in your diet that you're already eating, and then increase the quantity of those intentionally as a way to kind of like stave off the addictive, stuff that's happening later in the afternoon, which I would also guess for most of these people, it's happening after training, later in the day, when blood sugar regulation is all out of whack, hydration is all out of whack, and they've had training stress. So that's typically when that stuff happens. People have better shot at that in the morning, in the morning time, to avoid those things.
Yeah, it's like thinking about it from the perspective of, if I'm starting to reach for the simpler sugars and I'm starting to have these cravings, a little like flag that goes up that's like, ooh, I'm depleted.
Yeah.
Like that alone can be like, okay, take inventory of what I am eating and how is it enough. And then I really like that starting with that at breakfast time, because it's like that's your best chance to actually act on it, and then potentially doing it throughout the rest of the day as well. And then you said do that for about 2 to 3 weeks and see what would you track, like energy, cravings, and things like that.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it would happen just very intuitively after not even 2 to 3 weeks. I wouldn't even get that far. I'd get a week in and I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'm like, I can just feel a general sense of a shift in my body and my feelings as a result of actually being fed now, Yeah.
That's solid. Anything else on this note?
Well, I mean, if we were to summarize kind of what the action item is for people in the state, it's finding opportunities in their nutrition and nourishment plan that are of highest quality already, and just increasing those. So you're struggling with cravings, wanting something that you don't believe is good for you. That's a signal that your body is depleted or needs something that you're not giving it. So why don't you give it more of the stuff that you know it needs, even if it goes beyond the amount that you believe is the right amount. So like for breakfast, you always have 2 eggs, 2 pieces of bacon, and a half a cup of oats. But that's your breakfast, so you don't change that ever. But your body's depleted, it's showing you that. So why don't you try increasing the higher quality foods that you're having, so that you can truly figure out, okay, if I'm actually well fed and nourished and I get enough or more than what I think I need, what does that do to change something that's happening later in the day? I usually have a 20-ounce bottle of water in the morning and have another one in the afternoon. Have 40 ounces in the morning. Have 40 ounces in the afternoon. Similarly with, the food, you can do the same thing with your hydration. It's like increase the stuff that you know is good for you. I mean, I challenge you to go eat too much broccoli, right? Like if you're having broccoli for lunch, triple your portion for for a week, and see how that impacts. And I think you'll find that, many of these cases, people are under eating in the quality areas that they know they're already preset, and it's leaving them open to wanting, junk food.
And this is applicable to both populations you kind of talked about.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, I would definitely think for the look good, move well population, it's just as important to think about how do I increase the amount of higher quality food. So you're gonna have high quality food. Don't undereat. Getting up and having 1 egg and an apple for breakfast, That's great. That's way better than reaching for a bowl of cereal. If you're still reaching for the bowl of cereal in the evening because you're depleted and you're hungry and your brain is telling you need it, then increase the quantity of the good stuff that you're having at these other times of the day.
Love it. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Head over to speakpipe.com/lookgoodmovewell. Let us know if you have any follow-ups to this topic or any fresh questions that you want to send our way.
Sounds good. See you guys soon.